We're live
We're live.
and going to talk about one of the greatest mysteries of all time,
Right.
Atlantis.
Let's see how it goes.
Well, I want to open with asking you a very serious question, which growing up you told us that us Cubans were the descendants of Atlantis. Is this true?
No.
Oh, man.
But at one time I did believe because there is off the coast of Cuba, okay, very deep down, okay, in the waters, pyramid structures.
Mm.
And there was a husband and wife team that went out there and did an underwater investigation
Mm-hmm.
with the permission of
Cuban government.
the Cuban government, which at the time was Fidel Castro. And they came up with these very visible images of pyramids off the coast of Cuba.
Wow.
And they were alluding to the fact that, hey, how can something like this be possible off the coast of Cuba? Could this be the lost city of Atlantis? And I got into it and I started reading into it. I believe this was during the time that President Obama was president.
Mm-hmm. Not that long ago.
No. And I think Fidel Castro stopped the investigation.
Interesting.
I don't know if they were in cahoots with each other. You know, there's a lot of things that we don't know that's going on in the world. And our leaders make decisions supposedly for the best interest of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But they thought it was Atlantis just because it was an underwater city,
yes.
right? And all of a sudden, anytime there's an underwater city, people speculate.
Right. But these pyramids are like a mile down. So, you know, in order to, they're a mile down and underwater. Okay? How do you do that?
Mm.
How does the surface of the water or the waters of the earth elevate so much? Okay? Which means that if there's a pyramid down there, and you should see the visuals on the pictures, they really, there's no doubt they're pyramids, and there's no doubt they're man-made. And it's off the coast of Cuba at the tip. And you guys can Google it. It was an expedition that was done during the Obama administration.
Okay.
It was an investigation. There's also something interesting that I'll throw out there, okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Apparently, I think it's associated with this investigation. There was a light source that was still on underwater. You know, this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's up to you guys to figure out if it's true or not.
Right.
It's just some of the stuff that I've read. And
But you've been a huge independent investigator, journalist, or independent researcher on Atlantis for a long time.
right.
Just because, or why are you so interested in it?
I like mysteries. I like things that have not been solved. And so, you know, it just, unfortunately, you know, I've had the time to devote to this. This is one of my passions, right? So fortunately, I've had time to do that. I'm fortunate in that sense that, you know,
Yeah. So
there was a time when I was working 16, 17 hours a day, and I would come home and I'd be,
less time for research.
I'd be exhausted. It was survival, and I had to sleep
So out of
and
your
eat if I could.
yeah, out of your plethora of notes,
Yeah,
what
right.
would you
Well-
say is one of the most interesting things that we can open with about Atlantis?
Well, what I want to do here is just provide people with ideas, let them know that I'm no expert, and get these ideas and stimulate your mind and see where you go. I'll say this, there's a lot of good research done on the subject of Atlantis, okay? And there's a lot of good people out there, young people. But I don't want to mention names because I want to take our viewers to the original sources.
Okay.
Okay? So first of all, how do we know about Atlantis? Okay? Well, we know about Atlantis because of the writings of Plato. Okay? He's a Greek philosopher, and Plato was the student of Socrates. Okay? And Plato was also the teacher of Aristotle. So all these three names come up in history of men of character. Okay? They're seeking the truth and justice. These are so we get the story of Atlantis from Plato. And Plato is supposed to be a man of character, someone that would not lie. Okay? So, out of all his writings, okay, there's two books, the Crimeas and the Timaeus. I think it's called the Timaeus. Crimeas and the Tibias. Okay? And I'm mispronouncing it. And he goes into great length specifically describing a supposedly island of Atlantis. Okay? So this is Plato. Okay? Now, where does he get the story? He gets it from one of his ancestors 6 generations removed from him. His name is Solon. And Solon is supposed to be, again, another Athenian lawmaker that seeks justice, that wants to put down the right things. Okay? And he gets it from a trip that he went to Egypt. Okay? He went to Egypt, and he went to a high priest. I forget the name of the high priest right now, but the high priest translates the hieroglyphics in this temple, I think, of Ani.
Okay.
And gives all the details to Solon. And Solon writes all that stuff down, brings it back to Athens, and it stays in his family for 6 generations until Plato decides to write it down. And it's a huge mystery. Nobody knows exactly where it is. There's no conclusive evidence even to today. Although some of these young, what do you call it? Indiana Jones.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I like this young kid a lot, you know. But I want to mention only...
We can link
yeah,
a few people if you'd like.
there's just, the people we talk about all the time, the Graham Hancocks, this, that, you know.
There's a lot. But just to put context and a timeline, because you're saying Plato, he was around, it says he was around 428 to 347 BC.
Right.
Okay.
And to give it even further on the timeline, Solon lived, I think, 2,600 years ago. Okay, let's get that straight. And when he did his trip to Egypt, okay, the high priest in Egypt told him, this is a story of Atlantis, or an island that sank under the water, and that happened 9,000 years ago. So if you take 9,000 and you add 2,600, what do you get? You get 11,600 years.
Okay.
Now, what was happening to Earth during that time? And this is scientific things that you can research, okay? It's called the Younger Dryas, which was the end of the last ice age. Okay? And don't tell me that there are things out there that scientists don't know about. Because you can, time and time, so this is a myth. This is a legend. The story of Atlantis is considered a myth and a legend. Okay? And I'll buy it. It hasn't been proven, so it's a myth and a legend. Okay?
Yeah.
But where is it coming from? It's coming from Solon. It's coming from Plato. Okay? And even there's a writing, there's a writing and a map that was produced by Herodotus. Now, who was Herodotus? He has the label of the father of history. And he put together a map from different sources. And at that time, he had a tremendous reputation for being honest and a man of character, seeking justice. The father of history is what they've labeled him. He puts together this map with all different sources, and he labels it Atlantis, and he puts it in a specific point on the earth. And I'll share that later because my idea has changed. Okay? So I'm going to try to stick with scientifically proven things to make this different. Okay? So, and I've been reading about it for a long time, and I came up with my own conclusion, which, who am I?
We'll wait till the end for you to
Right.
give your conclusion.
But so as I read throughout the years, I honestly thought that if Atlantis existed at all, okay, it would be buried under the ice in Antarctica. And the reason I used to think that is because I read a book that was written by a guy named, his name was Charles Hapgood, okay? Charles Hapgood. And he came up with that book in 1958, okay? Now, he wrote several more, okay? He wrote another one in the 70s. And he's talking about a theory that he had, and it's called the shifting pole theory, okay? And what he has alluded to, and scientists now, you guys can look this up, scientists now agree with the fact that the poles can shift, okay? And what happens is that what he's saying is, and this is different from what's called continental drift. Continental drift has also been proven, and is the fact that the land masses separate themselves. I believe it's like an inch a year. That's continental drift, okay? It's got nothing to do with continental drift. What Charles Hapgood was talking about was a pole shift. And he came up with the theory that in the last 80,000 years, there's been 3 pole shifts, okay? And we're talking about the North and South Pole. And the reason that he's saying is that there were another thing that I want to say is the book that he wrote in 1958, the guy that wrote the foreword for that book was none other than Albert Einstein. So Charles Hapgood had this crazy idea, but he was conferencing with Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein believed in this so much that he actually wrote the foreword for this book. So you never heard of Hapgood, but you've heard of Einstein. And you know that Einstein came up with the theory of relativity, all this stuff. So he has a lot of credibility.
Right.
Okay? And he wrote the foreword for Hapgood's book, in which he's saying, look, initially they thought, look, because of the, you got to think the earth is a ball, and there are forces that act upon it from outer space. Planets are pulling it one way, and so forth and so on. That's why we have the waves in the oceans and all this kind of stuff, right? Okay. So what he was saying is, as the ice caps accumulate, they accumulate disproportionately, and this is a huge amount of weight on the earth. So initially they contemplated the idea that weight would shift the poles. But then Einstein came out and said, absolutely not. That the earth is stable enough where that kind of a weight does not do this. What does this is powers within the earth, because we have molten rock, and the core of the earth is very vibrant, as you see by volcanoes. And if you go deep under the ocean, there are cracks you see gases coming up. It's just an amazing, vibrant world that we live in.
Yeah.
And so what Einstein said, look, I agree with your theory, but not on the ice thing. And they both came to an agreement, and they were talking to each other all the way up to Einstein's death. Okay? And so he came up with this book in 1958. And so what he's saying is, look, the shifting of the poles, what it does, it takes the outer mantle of the earth, or the surface of the earth, and it shifts, okay, thereby shifting the poles. So, and there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. One person said, look, if you lived 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and you were looking for a magnetic pole, the magnetic pole back then would be different than the magnetic pole today. This is scientific fact. Scientists know that our magnetic poles are shifting. Okay? And actually, I believe they're shifting quite fast. So why
that's
am I
one theory. One theory is that there was a pole shift, and it changed.
Right. So one theory, getting back to Atlantis, what a lot of people thought was when this shift of the outer layer of the earth shifted, okay, it happened rapidly, and it took the island of Atlantis from where it was and put it, in Antarctica, and sunk it there under 2 miles of ice, okay? And in recent times, like in 2018, 2011, 2016, things have been discovered there that allude to a civilization. But who knows if it was Atlantis or not. Okay? But I'm missing something. But anyway, there's just a lot of information out there with regards to the geographic shifting of the poles. Okay? And it leads you to study a lot of things. Okay? So he wrote that book in 1958. And one of the interesting things is that, a lot of people like Graham Hancock says, hey, look, the large pyramid of Egypt was built, but is off by 1/60th of 1 degree, which is almost perfect construction, right? But why is it off by that little? Well, inadvertently, by Charles Hapgood writing that book, the shifting of the poles could account for the small discrepancy in some of the big, because they're saying, hey, this was astronomical calendar, but it's off a little bit. Why would the ancients be off a little bit? Well, this theory, which Einstein was part of, he wrote the foreword, could accommodate for some of that stuff. Okay? But, you got to figure out, okay, where do we get the gist of the information of Atlantis? From Plato. And Plato gets it from Solon. And Solon gets it from a trip that he did to Egypt. Okay? So when you add the 9,000 plus the 2,600, it throws it into the area of the Younger Dryas.
Right.
Another theory is they're saying, well, look, because prior to Göbekli Tepe, there was nothing older than 12,000 years. And Göbekli Tepe was purposely buried. Okay? They buried Göbekli Tepe on purpose. They built this fantastic thing, and then they bury it. Why? And one of the theories is, look, the earth was going through so much that they wanted to protect it. And they buried it so that at some future date they could come back, but they never were able to. We had a cataclysmic thing.
Right.
Another thing that you guys can search is the northern hemisphere. Okay, they found this big, huge crater underneath a glacier called Hiawatha, and apparently this crater is like, I think it's 15 or 19 miles long.
Wow.
Okay, and I think it's 1,000 feet deep. I hope I'm not mistaken on this, but it's huge, and I know that it's under that Hiawatha Glacier. So
Yeah.
something like that for sure would devastate anything that was existing. And that's why uh, Graham Hancock says, hey, we are a species with amnesia
Right.
because something happened that took us, okay?
So, where is one theory that it's other than Antarctica that
Okay,
it's
so
located?
so I used to believe that very much because why would it be off the coast of Cuba?
Right.
There's nothing, and then in the Mediterranean there's another one, and then there's another guy in
Greece,
yeah,
Spain.
it's Spain. There's another guy that did a study in Spain in an area that's kind of like deserty like looking, and it's cracked all over the place, from the dryness. And he says, no, it's underneath here. And I mean, he gave really compelling ideas,
Mhm.
right? So nobody knows where Atlantis is.
The Bahamas.
The Bahamas, the Bimini Road, all this.
Everybody wants to claim that it's
Well,
in their land.
there's a lot of good people out there doing a tremendous amount of research, and I don't think maybe there's some ego with some of them. They be the first one, okay? But I wrote a couple of things. I'm all over the place, but so that was the original idea. That and there is something buried under that ice because they keep finding stuff, okay? They keep finding stuff.
So that's one of the options.
That's one of the options. However, I changed my mind because in the 1980s, okay, astronauts on the Gemini mission discovered something off the coast of Africa, okay? And it's called the Richat structure, okay? And it's in Mauritania. And I got to tell you, if you go by the writings of Plato, because Plato described it pretty much in detail, this place called the Richat structure, it's spelled Richat, for those of you that want to look it up. It's also called the Eye of the Sahara, okay? It fits to a T to some of the things that Plato was describing.
Mm-hmm.
And here lies the inconsistency of all these research and ideas, because some people have even said that the island of Atlantis lies beneath the Bermuda Triangle. Okay? Again, different places, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But this one is very compelling. And I'll tell you why. One of the things that I was reading is that in the description of Plato, it says that the diameter of the island of Atlantis is 127 stadia. Okay? So when you do the math, and I followed some of this a little bit, 127 stadia is 607 feet. Okay? So when you multiply 127 by 607, it comes out to 70,089 feet. Okay? Which is 23.4 kilometers, which is 15 miles. Why is that so important? Because the Richat structure is actually 15 miles in diameter to the T. It's actually 15 miles. And it's concentric circles made up of valleys and little hills.
Mm-hmm.
And Plato said that Atlantis was a concentric circle, okay? 2 of land and 3 of water. And I tell you that the Richat structure is almost perfect to it. And then there's a lot of compelling stuff because
I have a quick question. So it's built in concentric circles. So they had a system.
well, it wasn't built. is a natural formation.
Well, I was going to ask,
of
because weren't they said to be advanced?
yes, they,
So, what if it was natural? What if it was built?
it wasn't built. This is a very much volcanic area, and what scientists are thinking now is that over the millennia, over thousands and millions of years, okay, this is a natural formation induced by a crater, a volcanic crater, and the forces underneath the earth raised it, and then it collapsed, okay, and so it formed this natural formation. Now, there's a lot of theories out there, and I read a really good one where they say, look, how come if they're so advanced, because the Atlantis is supposed to have been a very scientifically advanced, engineering advanced.
Yeah. Does Plato describe it in that way, or why do we believe that it's advanced?
Plato describes it that way.
Oh, okay. It's
Yeah.
an advanced civilization.
Yeah, that his predecessor Solon apparently had very, very specific and detailed writings from the trip that he did to Egypt. Okay? And so he describes it as a very advanced.
So he got the information Solon from another source.
Solon got it from an Egyptian priest.
So it's kind of the game of telephone also to a certain degree.
You're right, but
Because
and so you would say, why would you believe it, right?
No, you could say that things maybe get a little bit, there's some truth behind it, but things get a little skewed when you, I mean, unless you're copying
Right.
word for word.
Well, remember that the city of Troy
Mm-hmm.
was thought to be a myth and a legend. Okay? Remember that. Bless you. The city of Troy was thought to be a myth and a legend.
Mm-hmm.
And a businessman in Turkey set out to take a look in some areas that he thought, and he actually found the city of Troy. This is a fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he was a businessman, and he went out there and he did a research, and he found the city of Troy. Okay, so this is a fact.
And that's
This is no longer
somewhat recent, right?
Yeah. He was a businessman in Turkey, and he says, "Hey, you know what? I think that I have an idea." And he went out and researched it, and he found the city of Troy. So the city of Troy, with where they bring in the Trojan horse and all this stuff, and there was a
Right.
war between the Greeks and the Trojans, and the Greeks brought in the Trojan, and they took the Trojans. So this was thought to be a myth, and over time in history has proven that it wasn't.
Interesting.
Okay, and there's a lot of them. There's another myth of there's an island called Roramenu, which Solomon Islanders have this idea about it, where supposedly, and the reason they think they're myth is because portions of the stories get disguised under other things. Like, for example, apparently the king's wife had an affair with somebody else, and she went to live into this island called Roramenu. Okay? And that's how the story begins. And then he says that he brought two terra plants, and he kept one for himself and planted one on the island. And as that terra plant grew, it destabilized the island, and the island went under the waters. Well, the story sounds fishy,
Right.
but look it up. Scientists have actually found the island, and the reason it went underwater, it's because it was like on a natural shelf. Yeah.
Oh, a seashell?
Like that. And then there was an underground tremor,
Earthquake or
and it gave away that, and then that was the only thing that was holding the island in place. And then so the island didn't sink because he's planted a plant, a terra plant, and this thing about the wife.
That's the myth behind
That's
it.
the myth, and then everything gets thrown into a myth. But this
Right.
is also another island that was found that it's come down as history, as a myth or a legend. And so just because everybody thinks that Atlantis is a myth or a legend, but there's a lot of stuff in this Richard
So the
structure.
Richard structures, it seems like a really solid
It was discovered from outside,
outer space.
from outer space. It looks like an eye. It fits to the T on all the dimensions that Plato was describing. And there's a lot of stuff. Plato says that there were elephants in that area. And sure enough, they have bones of elephants. They even found bones of whales, which means that at one point it had access to the sea, or maybe even under the sea. Okay?
Interesting.
Another thing that is extremely important is that in the center of the island there was a spring of, because everything around there is salt water, okay, and there was a spring of natural water. There's a spring of natural water in the Richard structure, right in the center, okay. In order to get natural water anywhere else in Mauritania, you have to dig like 500 feet down, okay. So that's also something that goes with the description of Plato. Okay, it's called a spring of fresh water, and it said that Poseidon, okay, was the god that said, okay, I don't have a problem. Let's have a spring of fresh water, and there were elephants there, and Plato describes the elephants. And another thing that Plato describes is that there were a lot of minerals. There are a lot of minerals in Mauritania today. He describes special rocks that to be of color of white, black, and red. And today you find rocks that are white, black, and red. So there's just a lot of things. And as you go through the maps, and you see the satellite maps and stuff like that, you also see that it went through a tremendous upheaval. You see striations in the land from huge water flow. Okay, so that is conducive to sinking in one day and one night. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and we can link in the description, because I also watched a video on the Richard structure from a young guy, and he does an excellent explanation.
Oh, look, his first name is Jimmy.
We'll credit him because he did an amazing amount of research and probably spent time.
But see, he's a new kid in town, so to speak. Extremely intelligent, compelling. I mean, I saw that video too, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, he's saying that...
But he's in modern times.
Right.
If you think of Plato, if you think of Herodotus, if you think of Solon, if you go back to those, then you might pick up something that someone else on this planet hasn't yet picked up.
Kind of go to the source.
Yeah.
But then also listen to some of the other ideas
because
out there.
He's awesome.
Amazing, yeah.
Amazing, the research that he's done.
And Jimmy, he talks about that there was potentially like a huge amount of seawater that wiped it out, right?
Correct.
It took out the northern coast.
Yes.
Of Africa.
Right.
Okay, so that's another one that potentially it could be, right?
Yes, and this was discovered in the 80s. Now, prior to the Richard structure being discovered, I would read, oh no, it's in the Bermuda Triangle. Oh no, it's in Spain, off of Galicia. It's off the coast of Cuba. It's in the
Mediterranean somewhere.
In fact, another very very powerful researcher think is in the Azores. He favors the Azores.
What's that?
That's Randal Carlson.
What's the Azores?
It's a place where he thinks that Atlantis was.
Is that Europe or?
I'm not quite sure. No, I don't. The Azores are. I think they're off of the I'm not sure.
How do you spell Azores?
And so Randall thinks it's potentially off near the Azores, but
Azores, Azores. Azores Islands belonging to Portugal,
Okay.
located 900 miles west of the Portuguese coast.
Right.
Okay.
So it's hard to stay away from the prolific researchers that these guys are, and not mention them really truly. But at
Yes.
least at half of the video, I'm talking about, where it's coming from.
Sure.
And a lot of people say, well, this is myth. This is not true.
Yeah.
They revered Plato. Solon is supposed to be one of the seven sages, okay? One of the wisest of the seven sages.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you want to give attention to the sources, is what you're saying.
Right.
But we should give credit also to some of the amazing researchers.
Yeah, like Jimmy, Randal, Carlson. Yeah, let's do
Yeah.
it. I mean, why not?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
And we'll link them.
because my idea originally was, if you go through the sources, you're gonna run into them no matter what.
Oh, for sure.
The guys that are doing just
they're very
fantastic.
compelling.
Oh my God, you're gonna run into them. There's just no way that you can't, because they're, even if you look up Atlantis, I think, oh, these guys pop up,
Yeah.
because the scientific research that they are doing,
Yeah.
it's extremely compelling.
And there's so many different theories, and there's so many, like, I was just trying to also prepare and do some research. Where is it, this and that? There's so many. It doesn't lead you anywhere. You keep looking and looking. No one's found Atlantis.
That's right.
Unless one of these is correct, but you don't get any conclusion.
No, and look, even what we think we know
Yeah.
scientifically gets altered. Let me tell you why. In 1911, there was that huge earthquake and tsunami in Japan.
Mm.
I think it was 9.0, okay,
Wow.
in 1911. And I believe that it moved the coast of Japan like 7 feet or 8 feet, which is unheard of. And prior to that happening, scientists were adamant about the fact that, and you guys Google these, just fact check us, okay? Prior to that, they were saying, look, that this is, the displacement of the land masses occur, a half an
Over
inch to
time.
an inch over time, this and that, whatever. Well, what happened to this? An earthquake out of the blue. Okay, it's a big one, 9.0. Shifted the coast of Japan 7 or 8 feet.
Yeah, we don't know anything
We-
about
well,
our, we think that
we've
have
got
an
all these
understanding.
theories, and yes, there's the scientific approach, and there's a lot of credit to that. I'm not trying to discredit the scientists. We need them dearly.
Of
okay,
course,
we need
of
these
course.
guys.
But
we
you
need-
have something like that naturally occur, and then it changes maybe their perspective.
right, because you just never know.
Yeah.
The forces that are. We are no match for Mother Nature.
Oh.
And the reason why the story of Atlantis has such a mystery and is so compelling is because also as they pass it the information through time, it says that the gods became angry at the Atlanteans
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
and sunk them.
Yeah.
They threw a lightning bolt, and
Yeah, I've
that's the
heard-
part of the story that may be mythical,
Yeah,
but
but-
it's attached to.
But that's the same story of Noah's Ark.
Correct. Well, definitely there was a flood, because
Yeah.
every civilization
But it was
preceding us is talking about a flood.
but it came from because people were not living the way God wanted, and so he says, I'm going to wipe it out, right?
Okay.
That's the story of Noah's Ark. But I've heard Graham Hancock say it. He says, and we can get the exact quote, but in Atlantis, they failed to wear their,
prosperity
with humility or something like that. They failed to wear,
they failed to wear their prosperity with moderation.
something
yeah,
along those
yeah.
lines, right? And then they got wiped out.
Well, what they're saying is, look, they got greedy. They went the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
They started doing things that were evil, or not evil, but they don't say the word evil, but they say, inappropriate, unjust. They became unethical. They and they stopped wearing their prosperity with moderation. You know,
Yeah, something along
they
those lines.
they were
They
suppose
were
there's something.
merchants, you would think, right?
They were sea merchants.
Because
Yeah, they
they're
were.
right off of.
Yeah,
They
and
have access to the water.
yeah, they were a seafaring civilization. They had tremendous ships.
And that's, I think, one of the mystery behind it is like, okay, these guys were traveling. Uh, they had ships. They were merchants. They were probably able to travel the oceans. But if it really was 12,000 years ago or
11,600 years ago, which
that would be something that is it's unheard of, right? Because that long ago, we don't openly say we had the ability to travel the oceans like that.
right. Well, they were a civilization far, far more advanced than we were. Supposedly, they had anti-gravity figured out.
So
I mean, we can talk about it forever, man. But you know,
when you bring up Atlantis to certain people,
you can't.
I was gonna say, do you get people that laugh at you or just?
Oh, well, look, there's people out there already that think I'm crazy.
Oh yeah, and this just confirms it.
This just confirms it.
So, what else do you want to share with us about Atlantis? Because now it's fascinating.
Well, what I wanted to do, which I didn't accomplish, okay, was I just wanted to talk about the old writings.
Oh, I see.
And not mention necessarily, but we've mentioned everybody.
Yeah.
Because these people are tremendous. You should follow these people and check them out because they're tremendous. But what I wanted to do, I accomplished it a little bit. I went back to the original source.
Mm-hmm.
Why we are destroying Plato, right? On these writings. He wrote a ton of stuff. You know, he's revered as a man of justice and truth seeker.
Mm-hmm.
He writes about Atlantis, so we revere everything else that he did except this. Okay, that's number one.
No, you made that,
And-
you made that clear that like you're telling everybody listening, go to the sources,
Go to the sources.
go to Plato, listen for yourself, and then seek out other alternatives. Don't go straight to
To the young kid. Don't go straight to Jimmy. Don't go straight to Randal Carlson.
you'll end
Don't
up
go
at
straight
Jimmy.
to Graham Hancock. You're gonna end up there anyway because they are tremendous.
right.
And
No, I
I've
think
learned a
it's
lot
good
from-
though. You're basically saying make your own
Create your own idea.
idea
Because
first.
that's the idea here. We're doing this for fun, but to go back again, the temple that Solomon visited was the temple of Nia. And the high priest that he talked to was a guy named Sias. So it was the temple of Nia, and it was the high priest Sias. And he said, apparently it was like, you don't know your own history, Solon, because you guys were, because it was in that area. He says you guys were very advanced once before. You don't know your own. And he translated the hieroglyphics, and Solon took detailed notes, and kept it in his family for 6 generations until, because Solon is a family member of Plato. Okay, until Plato decided to put it to writing. Okay, and then that's how we get the Tramias and the other one that I forget. There's 2 writings, 2 books, and they're called Plato's Dialogues, the Timaeus and the Tramias or something like that. And it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and then there's other myths that have been proven. Like this island that sunk, Troy. There was another thing that a lot of stuff that has been proven.
Was it Alexandria one of those, the gardens or something like that?
No, those are not the gardens of the hanging gardens of, but that was one of the 7 wonders of the world.
Oh, okay.
And they're saying that was there. There's some. Look, even this. Let me throw this at you guys. The Romans, okay, they're renowned for many things. They're aqueducts and stuff like that, right? The Romans had a form of concrete, okay, that was harder than anything that we can produce today.
Wow.
Okay? This is fact. You guys can check this out. We have not been able to find that mixture, huh?
That mixture.
That mixture to produce the kind of concrete that the Romans had. We have not been able to this day to be able to duplicate that strength of concrete. Okay? So you tell me, with things like that,
Right.
okay, that
Oh, and we talked about the Lycurgus cup
the Lycurgus cup.
in a previous podcast.
Yes,
That they had nanotechnology.
nanotechnology. How on earth? How could you potentially? And to create that, you have to have these temperatures that are through the roof. So the idea is for you guys to, there's another myth. I'll throw one more myth out there that was proven. Okay, there was a material called orichalcum, and orichalcum was thought to be complete myth. Okay, it was a product that was malleable and durable, non-oxidizing, and it had a gold-like shine. Okay, well, in 2015 they found a shipwreck with some of these, what do you call it when you melt the gold down and you put them into bars of orichalcum. And as they researched it, it was a high quality type of brass. Okay, that was considered a myth, and scientists are tying this shipwreck in 2015 to the ability to have orichalcum. And here's another myth. So there's a lot of stuff that before we could write, it was passed down, because you have to remember that in the old days, writing today is a luxury that's affordable to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But in the old days, that was not the case. You had people that were called scribes, and it was like a career. And to learn to write was a luxury that wasn't presented to many. Okay? And so, you would have to go to school to learn to write, and then the kings and the pharaohs and everybody would bring you in, and you would write their stories on papyruses or whatever. So everything most likely was passed down by word of mouth until somebody thought, okay, I'm going to write it down.
Right.
And then a lot gets lost of, there's myth and legend involved in a lot of the truth. And so the idea is go out there, become a nerd, and search it out,
research
and discover
yourself.
something.
But I mean, you've given a lot of really good sources and information to that one can go look up.
So if I had to pick today, before 1980s, I thought that Atlantis was buried in, Antarctica, because of this shifting of the poles that, at first they thought it was a crazy idea. Einstein contemplated it. Now it's, a matter of fact. Okay. I made the distinction, okay, between the tectonic plates being moved and the land masses, being separated a little bit at a time. We threw in the earthquake from Japan. But I think today, I think Jimmy's right. I think the Richard structure is it. And, it's so far away and so remote that really nobody has dug it up. If we could get somebody with a lot of cash, take an expedition out there, we might find the lost city of Atlantis in the Richard structure.
I don't remember if it's the Richard structure. Well, I think that's super cool.
And it's
in the videos that he's put out on it. But I think that he said, Jimmy, that some people go there and then send him pictures or send him videos. Like, people are doing their research too, because since he put that video out, and they're sending him more information on it, and kind of he's created this
I prior to him, because I knew of the Richard structure prior to him, but I didn't give it a lot of importance. And it did look really funny, and it does look like an eye.
Right? Yeah.
And I would look at it and read some stuff on it, but I think he's the one that truly has dug into this and I think he should get credit
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah,
And he
we'll
says,
link 'em.
what I love about him is his guys go out and do your own. I'm just
Research,
throwing
yeah.
stuff up, you know. So in that sense, he's very humble. He's not trying to take credit for anything, but he's putting, he's linking the dots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And another thing
And
is,
it's a very compelling argument that
yeah.
he's got.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Another thing is that when you're looking up Atlantis, or a lot of things nowadays, and I came across this, there's a lot of fake altered photos
Yes.
that can mislead you, to go down a certain path. And they got me with
They got me many times.
yeah.
With
There was one about the is it the
Yanaguni structure in Japan, off the coast of Japan.
That
Yeah.
one, they got me because I was they alter the pictures. It's already amazing to
terrible.
see it,
Yeah.
but then when they alter pictures, so just be careful in doing that research. That you
Well,
you do your own
in
research.
our channel, if we say something that's wrong, it's going to be a genuine mistake.
Of course, yeah.
But there are people out there, because one of the arguments for that was that guy that did that, or the lady, whoever, I have no idea who they are, they got, I think, millions of views
Right.
for that particular video that they altered
It was
on
it
purpose.
was a picture that I saw, but then a lot of people were saying, "Hey, you're losing credibility."
Right, but you got this fame and fortune all of a sudden, so it's a boost to their
That's short
channel. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, because you lose credibility. Once you
You
lose
do.
credibility,
Yeah.
we're doing this for fun because it's something that's of interest to you. And you were showing me your research and all the pages.
Oh,
I mean, you have like
I
10
mean-
pages.
And look, I haven't gone into, because if you talk about, what happens with this, folks, is that when you want to put something together like this, then they talk about magnetic poles. So, okay, I remember magnetic poles, but not all that good. Now I have to go figure out, and so you research magnetic poles, and then you start looking at what creates our atmosphere and what protects us from,
Meteors. And
solar radiation. Okay,
Radiation, yeah.
and so you start getting, so you spend, you can. So then you need to figure out, where do I stop
Right.
so that I can just give enough information. But you have to read about magnetic poles. You have to read about, Antarctica.
Yeah.
You have to read about Greenland, because the northern hemisphere was hit by a mountain of steel. Okay, back in the days, you look at it, and this thing has left a 15-mile crater about 1,000 feet deep underneath the Hiawatha Glacier. Okay, in Greenland. Okay, and then you have to read about that, and then you have to discern what's true and what isn't in your mind, and then give the best.
Yeah.
What's the name of that guy that wrote Chariots of the Gods? He's extremely famous. He's Russian, not Russian, but German.
I
Anyway,
can look it up.
see if you can. He wrote that book when he was very young, and there are things in there that he mentions that are not completely correct, and then he says it. Eric Van Daniken. So Eric Van Daniken comes out. This is another tremendous research. Eric Van Daniken comes out and says, "Look, guys,
Swiss.
yeah, Swiss. Some of the, Chariots of the Gods I read in high school. This is like when God created the heavens and the earth for me, because
Yeah, but some of it wasn't true. You're saying?
he put out. It was a bestseller for years and years and years, and he meant to do well. He's not a man that can be bought, okay? But some of the things that he deduced were not exactly. Later on, they were proven.
Debunked. Yeah.
Yeah, later on, they were proven, a couple of his things. I have the greatest admiration and respect for that man. He wrote Chariots of the Gods, I think, came out in 1978 or even prior to that, because I read it. I think I read this in high school. I'm sure I did. Okay? If you look it up to date. And so, anyway, this is not a man that's out there to try to deceive the world. He tried to put out what.
68.
In 68. I read it in 1974. Okay? And that's, you know. So.
68. Is that when you got here? 69.
I got here.
No.
In 69. Yeah. So in 1969, I was 9 years old. Okay?
Yeah.
I read it, you know, can you imagine? I've been, anyway, and he's built his own, like, mystery park on ancient
really?
things in Switzerland. I love to go there.
That's cool.
You know, and so he's tremendous. But he's not trying to deceive the world. He wrote it as he saw it at that time, you know, and then as things develop, okay. So I have a great deal of respect and admiration for that man.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, some of the things in his book are incorrect. You follow, right? But when you purposely try to deceive people, like that thing, that video for the Yanaguni,
structures, yeah.
that's not good.
No.
That's
So, to wrap it up, anything else you want to throw in? I mean, I think you did an excellent explanation, and
I was all over the place, but
you took us to the beginning, and then some of the theories, and we'll link up and give credit.
I think
to those
the
guys.
Richard structure. How do you say it? Richard structure?
The Richard structure.
The Richard structure is actually the lost city of Atlantis.
All right, we'll go with
There's
that.
way too much stuff that we haven't even covered that. It's in Plato's descriptions of the Timaeus and the Cretaeus. Yeah, I got it now. So, all right.
Cool. Thank you.